see here. Okay, I think this one is it. Yeah. Okay, I'm not sure who's tuning in right now, but I'm just going to do an election analysis of the Wisconsin election results as they come in. As of right now, the polls are closing. So really, it's going to be an interesting race, which will kind of be the first big barometer election in a swing state since the 2024 election. So this is going to have some pretty interesting implications into what we could be seeing in our political divides within the United States. So essentially, I'm just going to be watching the election results as they come in and comparing them to a wide variety of previous election results of Wisconsin, both the presidential election and then some of their earlier judge elections, based on how the counties are going and how the vote tallies are coming in. It'd be pretty interesting. Before I go into any of that, though, we do have some election results which are pretty crazy. The Florida special election results. Now, one thing to note, these are extremely red, like Trump plus 30 districts. So there's been a pretty significant shift in how these districts voted now versus how they voted just around 6 months ago. So as you can see here, this election, I believe New York Times actually has a link to their 2024 result. So Michael Waltz, who is now within the Trump administration, won 66% of the votes. So for every two people voting in this election, or for every three people voting in this election, two people voted for him, one voted for his opponent. It's a very massive, dominating victory all across this district, composing in several Northeast Florida counties. Not a single one of these counties went to the Democrat. The closest county being Volusia County, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, I have no idea. It was 60-40, which is still pretty dominating victory. When we go to this election here with Randy Fine and Josh Weil, it cratered pretty significantly. Now there's not as much of a turnout, still extreme turnout for a off-year election, 110,000 to 83,000 votes. But you see 43% to 57%. That is a massive shift of around 20% from the election that just happened 6 months ago. And in nearly every county, that 20% shift occurred. Now, if we look into the Florida 1st District, there's almost just as crazy of a shift I just want to double check if there were any results in Wisconsin coming in yet, because that's the one that I actually want to watch. But this is another huge shift that we're seeing. So another district, this is in November of 2024. Another 2-1, for every one voter the Democrat got, 2 votes went to the Republican. And unfortunately, in this case, the Republican who won was Matt Gaetz, who's a now disgraced congressman. You can just look into his name if you want to learn more about what he was getting involved in. But it's just a crazy result in just a small shift in the 6 months since that election. I think some of the votes are still tallying in, but you can see this massive shift from 66 to the Republican to 57%, from 34 to the Democrat to 42. So that's an 18 or 19% shift. Yeah, I think it's 18% shift in this district. And you can see a Democrat's winning a Panhandle County district, or a Panhandle County within the district, which is pretty unprecedented to see in an election. So yeah, some of these counties that are less populated are swinging pretty strong for the Republicans still, but the Democrat really overperformed. So it's kind of a sense of, while this electorate may not be 100% indicative of the electorate that's voted in 2024, it's a sense of how there's a large difference in the electorate, or a large difference in who's energized and what is bringing people out in the polls. If anyone has any questions, you can put them into the chat here. I accidentally just streamed my WhatsApp. That's probably not a good thing to be doing. Let's see here. Okay, I'll put my WhatsApp over here so I don't accidentally stream that. And then here we are. So Wisconsin still isn't coming in as of right now. My understanding is the polls are all closed, so we should be getting some results. Maybe they have exit polls. I'm going to look up exit polls, Wisconsin Supreme Court race, to see if there's anything before I get the actual results. I don't see any exit polls. It isn't really that important, so I don't expect news coverage to be really happening of it. But we can really see right now what's going on. Let's see. Gotta go through my tabs here. Yeah, get rid of this tab. So yeah, I'm streaming here. So let's see here. Offers chances. So yeah, the biggest one was this Atlas Intel poll. Atlas Intel was one of the most accurate pollsters in both 2024 and 2020. So this is a pretty big shift, as you can see from the 2024 results. Wisconsin does have a history of electing Democrats to the Supreme Court in the past 5 years. So we can show you a few different elections here. In 2020, the Democrat won 55% to 44%. That was pretty big because that was an election before the 2020 election, and that was around the time of COVID. So it also may have been a little bit of a not as indicative of future elections. So it was kind of an off year, weird election. 2023 was one that will really kind of be pointing to pretty frequently when we're looking at the 2025 results. And that's largely because the 2023 results were 55 to 44. So it's a pretty big trouncing of the Republican by the Democrat affiliated candidate. I do have to go over in these Wisconsin Supreme Court elections. They are non-affiliated to political parties. So the candidates themselves are not a part of political parties, but they are aligned to different political parties, and they often get nationalized in these races just as they would in any other election. And the key point of analyzing the election is it's a key barometer election to see where the country is 6 months after, especially when this has been a nationalized race. You had like around $100 million get spent on a single Supreme Court seat in Wisconsin, which is pretty crazy. And it's to really get a sense of where people are and how they're being affected by different policies being implemented by the incoming Trump administration, and to see if people are more amenable to a Republican Supreme Court justice or a Democratic Supreme Court justice in the state of Wisconsin. And if we are to believe the polls that were done, so this Atlas Intel poll essentially had 542 respondents, and they gave Crawford, the Democratic aligned candidate, 53%, and the Republican aligned candidate, Brad Schmiel, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, or Schmel. I'm not entirely. I think I'm going to go with Schmel for the rest of the night, or just refer to him as the Republican aligned candidate, just so I don't butcher his name repeatedly. But yeah, he got 46% in the poll. This is a very hard election to poll because it's hard to really get a good gauge on who's going to come out. And there's been a lot of advertisement to get people to come out on both sides. But a 53 to 46% would be a pretty massive lead for the Democrat in comparison to, we do have our first results coming in from one of the WOW counties, Waukesha County. But it would be a pretty big result shift from 2024, in which Kamala Harris was defeated in Wisconsin by about 1% of the vote, which ultimately was one of the key states that allowed Trump to win in 2024. Another election I do want to pull up is the 2024 Wisconsin Senate election, because that is another election where the Democrat did win in Wisconsin. I'm going to use New York Times results because I like their graphics the most. They just tend to have the best graphics. And yeah, we can kind of do a direct comparison. So this is what the Democrats are going to want. They're going to want to either get 49%, or I mean, obviously over 50% in this election. But they're going to want to get majority. They're going to want to win over more votes than Republicans. So they're going to want either this or better in terms of percentages, and they're not going to want their 2024 results or worse if they want to win. So as we can see, this first county result, only 1% of the results in, so we don't even really have any idea of if this is coming in from a early in-person vote or a mail-in vote or anything. But we have this first result, and we could just directly compare it to this result. And it does look, if we're to extrapolate this to the whole county, this would be a very good result for the Republican and a very bad result for the Democrat. But it's much too early to get any of that to come in. The other thing that Wisconsin's doing is like a voter ID requirement. This was essentially require you to have an ID with you to vote. That's probably going to pass just based on this first result I'm seeing. It's going to be a lot less close than this Supreme Court election. There's also an election for the superintendent of public instruction. I expect that to go quite similarly to the Supreme Court race, but we'll have to wait and see. For those that are tuning in right now, I don't know if anyone's coming in. First results are coming in. Yeah, it's here. Give me one moment here. I just want to send it out to a few more people. I have to copy the link from somewhere else. But yeah, as you can see right here, the results are trickling in. Oh yeah, if anyone's tuning in, I'm just sending the link out to a few more people. But yes, so as you can see here, the election results are starting to trickle in. Really hard to get much of a sense of how it's going with these results, but I want to directly compare them to 2024. So here is the Senate race, but I want the presidential. So La Crosse County is kind of a more Democratic leaning county on the west side of Wisconsin, and it just came in 7% of the vote. This is exactly the type of margins the Democrats would need for a close victory. More votes are coming in, but so if the Democrats are running their results from 2024 by 6%, like they are in this specific county, I believe it was 6%. Let me recalculate that. That one was a different one. So 3 plus 3, yeah, or 5 to 6%. That's exactly what they'd want to be at to win the election. Now, as more Waukesha County votes come in, we can kind of get a barometer for that. Yeah, it looks like it's mirroring the 2024 results, but that county is very little votes coming in, so we'll have to wait and see what that'll be for that. Really, the only other elections that did happen, I did discuss them earlier, were Florida, which is a pretty massive shift towards the Democrats from 2024, identical style races, an 18 or 19-point shift in both of these elections. This was their 2022 result, and then the 2024 result, and then the 2025 result right here. So that is a very big shift. We're seeing some more results trickling in from these two counties that are just getting their votes out, which we love to see. Not really given us too much of a sense of turnout, but it's obviously going to be significantly less than these 2024 results, with Baldwin and Trump winning respectively their races. I have no idea what to expect when it comes to turnout, but if 15% of the votes are already in, and it's only 40K people, 40K in Waukesha County, it isn't looking like it's going to get close to the 2024 results. So we just have to wait and see. Looks like we are getting the first results out of Kenosha, and that would be a very bad result for the Republican in the race if Kenosha flips Democrat, because they are going to need every single vote they can get to win this race. It's going to be a very uphill battle for the Republican. And with this right now, this result right now, if this trend continues, I know only 6% now. If that trend continues, it's going to be a pretty easy flip for the Democrats. It's just going to be a question over what the margin is in the election. Now, one of the things that's going to be pretty key about this is that in Wisconsin, there is a 7-seat Supreme Court, and the Democrats currently, or liberals, because they're not officially Democrats, they're nonpartisan officials, but liberals on the court have a 4-3 majority. And this court historically, up until I believe 2023, had a Republican majority. And Wisconsin's kind of been notorious for having a Republican gerrymander, in which the Republican Party is able to win their House and Senate elections very easily, just as a pure result of the fact that the districts that are drawn benefited the Republicans. And we can kind of show you that through some of these earlier. I'll try to show like a 2018 Wisconsin House race. This is how an example of a very gerrymandered state. So as you can see here, these are just the House of Representatives seats. I actually kind of wanted to do the House, not the House of Representatives. Let me see Wisconsin House of Representatives. Give me one moment to pull that up. Here it is. No, that's not it. 1 second while I get this ready. Maybe if I put State House, I'll get it. Usually they do have it, but I'll just have to do this one, the State Assembly. So this is a kind of a pretty key, like a textbook example, I would say, of a gerrymandered state. As we're getting some of these results coming in, still trickling in. That's kind of the first big result we've seen, but I do want to go over this gerrymander. So in 2018, the Democrats kind of had a blue wave year, but as you can see, they only got 53% of the vote throughout the state, 1.3 million votes, and the Republicans only got 1.1 million votes for their state house seats. And the Republicans got 63 seats, and the Democrats got 36 seats. This was a result of the fact that the state maps were being drawn by the representatives themselves, and this occurs in both Republican-dominated states and Democratic-aligned states. Illinois is an example of where the Democrats gerrymander the other kind of their own seats in the same way as this. But this is an example of essentially, historically, the Republicans have notoriously gerrymandered Wisconsin, which you could kind of see has led to some of these judge elections swinging so heavily in favor of the Democratic-aligned candidate. I think there's just more anger to be had within Democrats not feeling like their votes count as much in Wisconsin, which kind of led to some of those elections to go so far towards the Democrat in these off-year elections in the past 5 years. Ultimately, this allowed for Democrats to have, or liberals in this case, a 4-3 majority on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And with that, they were able to kind of draw more nonpartisan districts to make the elections more competitive in the Wisconsin State House elections and state Senate elections. Republicans want to flip it back to a conservative majority so they can start overturning some of those maps to kind of get more back to their gerrymander. In addition to a wide variety of other things, abortion rights are a very contested issue within the state. The liberal majority would obviously probably keep abortion rights maintained, whereas like a conservative line court would want to limit abortion rights in this situation. And then there's a few other things that are at hand in relation to labor unions and congressional redistricting, like I was referring to earlier. So we have the first big flip. Susan Crawford has taken the lead on Brad Schmel. And I probably should have looked up how to pronounce his name properly before starting this, but yeah, I will not understand his name. But as we can see from the start here, Madison, Wisconsin, Dane County results are coming in, which probably is a key result of making the Democratic candidate be in the lead for now. It's still far too early with only 6% of the results in to see who's going to win. The Democrats still have a lot of votes in Milwaukee to count. Republicans have a lot of rurals to run the table on. We don't have any county that has really a large amount of votes in, except for this Door County, which is 34%. So we can kind of use that to make an analysis of what the previous elections have been there. So let's look. Door County, it's now 55-45 with 1/3 of the votes in. If we look at this exact same county in 2024, 6 months ago, it was 51-48 with 100% of the votes in. So that is just enough of a shift for the Democrats to have a comfortable lead. That's about, give or take, a 8 to 10% shift in the direct votes. And that would be enough for the Democrats to have just exactly what this Atlas Intel poll was indicating, of like 53% to 46%. I expect that to be similar to the result, particularly because Atlas Intel was so accurate in the 2024 polling that I would say it's going to be probably within 2 to 3% of what that poll was indicating. If anyone wants me to analyze specific counties or anything else specific related to this race, you can leave a question in the comments. Let's see what's also going on here. I already went over Florida a little bit, but Florida had some pretty interesting results. Another thing, I do believe the Wisconsin Democrats did get a new map. So in 2024, the Democrats, they lost pretty narrowly in the popular vote, but you can see they got 48% of the vote in this election, and they now have 45 seats to the Republicans' 54 seats. Whereas in the previous election, they only had 35 seats when it was 53% to 44%. We can keep going back in time. Only 38 seats. They actually won seats despite losing the vote percentage. They got 38 seats to 61. And really, this is kind of the most key example, like I was saying earlier, of a gerrymander because they got 53% of the vote and only 1/3 of the seats in the state assembly. So this is one of the key issues that people in Wisconsin are voting on. They don't like their maps being, so one-handedly in the side of one party, and or some people may actually prefer, the maps to be that way. So that's kind of one of the key issues that they're voting on. We're getting more results to come in. I think that's mainly results out of Dane County. This is one of the biggest Democratic vote sinks in the state. So this is going to be a key county to analyze as more votes are coming in. This is the size of lead projection. To compare the voter ID, it's looking like Wisconsin is going to vote on that voter ID requirement pretty handedly. It might get a little bit more competitive as Milwaukee comes in, but yeah, I'm fairly certain this is going to pass. And then, we have the last election, which is this superintendent of public instruction. It looks like the results for that coming in are different than the results for the Supreme Court, so it's going to be hard to analyze them at the same time. Let's switch over some counties. I want to do direct comparisons of different counties that are coming in. So first, we can just look at some of the counties. I already did Dorr, but let's see what else. 35% in Winnebago County, or Winnebago. I'm not entirely certain how it's pronounced. But it's a 6% lead for the Democrat, whereas Winnebago in 2024 was a 5% lead for the Republican. So already from these results alone, unless there's something drastically different about when the votes are being counted, just from these county changes alone, we're already seeing that almost unequivocally, if there's a 5 to 10% shift from the 2024 results, the Democrat's going to win. Just as you can see pretty clearly in 2024, Trump won by 1%. If there's a 5% shift towards the Democratic aligned candidate across the state, which it does tend to have, there are sometimes distinctions in different regions of the state, but in a pretty nationalized election like this, you should expect it to be very unison on a county by county basis on how it's going to go. And I can already make an early prediction that Susan Crawford is going to win. The question is going to be by how much of a margin. Democrats are really trying to blow this race out of the water to kind of make it look as like a key barometer election for them. And it would make sense why they'd want to do that. with all of the things going on with this administration. They want to make it seem like they have support, and they want to make it seem like there's resistance to Trump. Republicans want to do the opposite with this election, and that's why there's been $100 million being spent on this race. So they want to essentially make it 100% certain that, like, Trump seems to be carrying his mandate out, and that Republicans all across the country are delivering on the issues they ran on. And as we can see, more of the results twinkle in. It's still competitive, but really hard to tell what the final results will be. How big will the fall of this election be? It's really hard to tell. There's going to be a lot of speculation on the election, on how it matters. One thing that's going to be key is this election isn't going to be that indicative of, what's going to happen in 2026. Number one, because it's far too early, but number two, because this is a nonpartisan Wisconsin Supreme Court election, and the issues that are kind of being defined in this election are some that people in Wisconsin might lean pretty radically different to people in, like, how they vote in this election is pretty radically different for how a lot of people might vote in a presidential election. That's another 6% shift towards the Democrat right there, just based on Dane County drops. But what I mean by that is people are voting on how they've people are voting in a court-based election. People are voting on their interpretation of who they think is going to enforce the law that they care about more, and they're voting on issues where they think whichever party is within their own state is maybe overstepping their legal bounds, or maybe they want protections on very specific issues. So the Democrats, running on labor union rights, congressional redistricting, and an abortion rights, people in Wisconsin are more likely to be in favor of those than they are to be in favor of Democrats in general. So I don't think it's 100% indicative of how things are going to go. And part of my justification for that is, if you do look at this 2023 election, you would think, oh, Wisconsin's going to go to the Democrat handily in 2024. They won by over 10% victory. In this case, a 10% margin, plus 10% positive margin. Whereas in 2024, 1 year later, a much higher turnout election, Republicans win and stun the Democrats. They did win the Senate election, but it's still much closer than anything close to what happened in 2023. So my assumption from that data, and from the data that I'm seeing right now, is that people in Wisconsin are much more likely to vote for Democratic judges or Democratic aligned judges, but they're much less likely to be voting for Democratic, legislative politicians. What we can see right now is a lot of these key center counties in the state come in, but very early results. One county is 100% in, so this is going to be the first county we can do 100% a prediction on and extrapolate that data to other counties. So first, we can look at turnout differential. 23,000 votes for the Democrat, 13,000. They just retracted their data. They said it was 95%, and then they cut it back to 80%. So I don't want to jump before more results do come in. But so pretty much, 4/5 of the votes are in, so we can make a little bit of a prediction out of it. 23,000 to 13,000 votes. Let's look at how many people voted in this county. So the Democrats got 40,000 and the Republicans got 32,000, 54-45. It's now 63-37. So yeah, that's a massive shift of about 16% from the prior election, if you count both sides of the there. So I would say unequivocally, if that trend holds in other counties, the Democratic Supreme Court candidate is going to handily win this election. I would say by a margin of around 7%, maybe 8%. But we have to wait and see more results. Other things that are going on now, we can kind of look. The Florida results, we can look at them again briefly. It was an 18% shift, between 18% to 20% in both of these counties from 2022, which is pretty radically different. And I think this is the first time I've ever seen a Democratic congressional candidate win this very particularly Republican ruby red Panhandle County of Florida. The Panhandle is one of the most conservative regions of Florida. Pretty crazy to see that result. Maybe that might be her local constituency. I'm not entirely certain the background of this candidate, but that was another key election that did happen today. But our main focus is going to continue to be Wisconsin. We can finally start seeing more results trickle in. Eau Claire County, 60-40. And we can see here, Eau Claire County is 55-44. So yeah, another trend where the Democrats 10% higher than they were in 2024. And it's a 1-year difference. But I guess another key thing to indicate when you're looking at a special election and an off-year election result versus the 2024 result, a key thing to think about is this electorate is wildly different than the one that just turned out 6 months ago. Much more of them are high propensity voters, tend to be older voters, tend to be more partisan voters, and tend to be more politically engaged people, even though $100 million was spent on this election. So a majority of people in Wisconsin were well aware of this election. It's just a lot less people are likely to come out and vote in an election like this and care. If anyone does have any questions or want me to focus on any specific county or anything specific to this election, you can put it in the chat. So we can try to compare a little bit for the counties in 2023. I mean, it's just crazy to see the amount. Let me pull up the 2025 Wikipedia page here, and we can see what's just crazy about the difference. And this is another important aspect of campaign finance that we really have to address in this country. Because as you can see here, only, what was it? Less than $4 million was raised and spent in 2023. And you had this result, pretty handily win for the Democratic aligned candidate. But less than $5 million was spent on this race. It wasn't nationally politicized. It was kind of just an important election for the state of Wisconsin, and people voted on it based on their local issues. Now that it's so close to the election of Trump, you see all this money funneled into this race. I don't know if, both candidates and their respective supporters have spent heavily on this race, with total spending topping $100 million, doubling the previous spending records spent on I was actually wrong about that. So in 2023, the campaigns themselves only raised this much, but it's very likely that more was spent. I would say it might have gotten up to 50 million. So I was wrong about that. A lot of money was spent on this election. Even an ad was ran on the 2023 Super Bowl. So it was still pretty bad and full of, local fundraising. But as we can see here, it's pretty disgusting how $100 million is spent on a single election with the sole goal of making one side win more. All of this money being spent, and it won't even have that much of a difference in the margin or the turnout. This money could be going to plenty of other things, but it is just how American politics is in this current state, with how we are electing our officials and how campaign finance is running in this country. It's just unfortunate to see how much money is being spent on private advertising. So yes, 100 million being spent, and a lot of this is actually being spent with millionaires being involved in the race. On the Republican side, Elon Musk has spent the significant most amount of money from the Republican side. It looks like just around him alone has spent like 25 million. Well, the Democrats have kind of like a wider field of different billionaires. I know that George Soros was listed as one of them that spent money on this race, but the Illinois governor was kind of throwing some of his campaign cash at this race as well. So it is pretty interesting to see the difference in funding all throughout this election, and it is pretty condemnable and sad to see how much is being spent on such a relatively minor election. It's just deciding the Supreme Court in Wisconsin. One American politics works at this time. So yeah, we're going to go back to the results. At 35% of the vote in, I know I already did make the call that Susan Crawford would win this election, but not even seeing what counties are coming in, just by seeing the basic the percent shift in all of these counties that have large amount of results in. Susan Crawford, 100%, I will call it right now, will win this election. The Democrats are going to maintain the 4-3 majority on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. It's not going to flip to the Republicans. The question here is going to be the margin and how much she wins by. If she wins by like 3 to 4%, that'll be a pretty good showing for the Republicans, because while it does show that they've for them and that they can go on. It's not a matter of if she wins, Dennis. I'm fairly certain it's the election's pretty much over. With 35% in, there's not a slim chance that the Republican's going to win. But what we're going to have to analyze as the results come in is this margin I've been talking about. And I would say if the Dems only win by 3 to 4%, there's a question on how much their energy really is, because you can easily see this energy in the Florida special elections. Partly is because they did overspend in these elections. Republicans didn't feel the need to spend money on them because they were plus 30 Trump districts. So there wasn't really anything the Democrats could do to win them. But, you can see an 18% shift in these races from just 6 months ago. So that does show pretty significant Democratic enthusiasm and shift, in both enthusiasm and in mobilization. And that should be concerning for the Republicans going into 2026. If the Democrats win anything between now and 2026, it does kind of show a general trend that the electorate of this country is not in the place it was 6 months ago, and that things have happened in between now and 6 months ago that have kind of caused a massive shift. Wisconsin being a very important state to analyze this information from, just based on the fact that in Wisconsin, it is a swing state, and it was one of the key states that in 2016 went to Trump, in 2020 went to Biden, and in 2024 went to Trump again. So if the Republicans are losing ground here, that would be pretty concerning for them going into 2026, where there's a gubernatorial election there. And in 2026, we're going to have a lot of key House districts that are pretty competitive in Wisconsin voting. So now we can kind of look more into results. Dane County, Democrats are winning by around 6 to 7% more in Dane County, which is their largest hub of votes, very large vote swing for them. In Milwaukee County, it looks like they're even running up the margins there. Another 6 to 7% higher, which is pretty big, but that'll be exactly what they need to win this election and win it pretty handily. I expect it, like I said earlier, to be like around a 7% margin above the Republican. Let's see where else has a lot of votes in so I can analyze it. La Crosse County, they keep taking votes away from it. Maybe there's precincts that haven't been counted, but it said 95% earlier and now it doesn't say anything. This is going exactly how expected. The superintendent election looks like it's going to be a little bit more closer, but I still think the Democrats are going to win this one as well. Not entirely certain, though. A much less important election than this one. Okay. As we continue to get more results, I'm going to check on different counties. Let's look at Kenosha County. Something I did look at earlier. This was a county that both Eric Hovde and Trump won in 2024. And that is not what Republicans want to see that county flip back to Democrats by 5 to 6%. Azauki County, I'm not entirely certain how to pronounce that. I think that's one of these infamous WOW counties outside of the Milwaukee area. I think it's Waukesha, Washington, and Azauki, but I'm not entirely certain. I'm not a Wisconsin political analyst. But Azauki County, another county that went to Republicans in 2024, that the Democrat is winning right now. This is 100% what the Democrat would want to see, and I can unequivocally call it that the Democrat's going to win the election. It's not too early to make that determination. Here are some of these rural counties as well. Wisconsin does have a pretty big history of these. They have a lot of small cities in these areas, and Wisconsin has kind of a Democratic history in a lot of these counties. So even in 2024, you can see the Democrats performing particularly well, around 40% in a lot of these areas. They're outright winning indicative of the same map that 2023 showed, where Democrats in the rural areas of Wisconsin turn out at a higher percentage than they do in the the Democrats seem to turn out more, but the Republican base that may be voting in 2024 is just not coming out for these special elections. And that's going to be a big problem for the Republicans if they have more special elections and going into the 2026 midterms. Because if they can't get this base to turn for them in the midterms, they're going to have a large hamper on their agenda in the form of Democratic resistance. I guess one of the bigger implications of what is going to happen with this election is just the sheer fact that this race was nationalized, and Republicans might actually be biting a little bit of a bullet by trying to do that because they were like the Democrats. This was a Democratic held seat. I believe someone resigned their role just because they were getting very old. And this race was kind of held between Republicans and Democrats. It was going to be a large expectation that both Democrats spend a lot of money to retain the seat, and Republicans spend a lot of money to take over the seat. But the way in which the Republican strategy of involving Musk so heavily with the race, Musk being one of the less popular people within Trump's administration, he is having his approval rating tank pretty heavily. I can pull up a poll of that. In comparison to a lot of other White House officials, Elon Musk, this is I don't think this is yeah, 54% unfavorable, 42% favorable. So that's pretty indicative of him being less popular. In this one, he has a negative 19 approval rating, a negative 19 margin. Involving him in this race was just a strategy that's doomed to fail, because even though his money does help turn out people that might not be turning out, his presence is turning out a lot more people that have a negative view of him. And you can see in a much less partisan race, the Republican is really outrunning the Supreme Court candidate, because they didn't have that national presence. In this one, it seems like it's a state public school election. Maybe people are more looking for someone that doesn't have the complete backing of the teachers unions, or they might be looking for someone that might have more of a socially conservative outlook for managing, the state's public schools, and they're voting in this election. But it seems very clear that the same people that are voting in this Democratic judge, at least 4 to 8% of people are also voting for a Republican superintendent of public instruction. So it's pretty wild change to see that from there. 41% of the votes in. The margins did start to get a little bit better for the Republican as some of these rurals did start to turn out. And I think the Wow counties also are coming out. This is a very early Republican area. It seems that as the suburbs shift a little bit more towards Democrats, it's becoming less and less of a Republican area. Let's see, in 2023, this Zauke County still didn't go to the Democrat, but it's looking like it's getting pretty close now, with 50.5% to the Republican, 49.5% to the Democrat. Let's see here. Is there anything else that the New York Times wants me to watch today? Just giving me crap about Musk. Yeah, no one cares about that. Okay. Yeah, really the key thing is going to be this Wisconsin race. The Florida results are very interesting, but it is a little misleading when you have a special election where Democrats are obviously going to be a lot more energized to come out. The Democrats did run their candidates, and they did get an 18% flip, and they spent more money to do so. But the candidates were essentially just sacrificial lambs to just show percent changes. It's still a defeat, and Republicans have solidified their seats that they won in 2024. So there's less of a risk for Republicans to lose House votes now that they have two more particularly conservative Republicans back in those seats for the different people that Trump pulled out of Congress. Or in the case of Matt Gaetz, was forced to resign in disgrace. Well, had a lot of allegations in his case. Okay, split ticket voting has increased, would you say, in the last few years? It really depends. This is Supreme Court elections and court elections in general heavily change on a year-to-year basis. Different issues define these elections. So I wouldn't go on a whim and say split ticket voting has increased in the last few years, but I do think that people have different perspectives on these individual races. I mean, this is a key example of split ticket voting, where the issue here is going to be education policy, and you would expect more people to be, at least right now, leaning to the right on education policy, as opposed to something like the gerrymandering in Wisconsin. Wisconsin, part of the reason why people do vote in such liberal justices is because this history. I was going into it earlier, but Wisconsin was one of the most gerrymandered states in the entire country. I mean, Democrats got a majority of the vote in this election, and they just got pounded in these districts. Even in the like rurals that are like more favorable to Democrats, you see these districts are drawn in a specific way that put them into different vote sinks. So they split these suburban areas around these small cities, and they split where there would be higher Democratic vote sinks, and then they make it so the Democrats can't maximize their vote. They run the table on these community entire metro. So there's no Republican voters in this entire area, and then the Republican votes get maximized because you see these splits out here, like the metro is split into these rural districts. And that was the old map in Wisconsin. So I think a lot of Wisconsin voters might be split ticketing towards these liberal justices because they get very irritated by Republicans gerrymandering the state, and it's kind of just a general backlash. Wisconsin also another key thing in 2010, Wisconsin, or it might have been actually earlier. Let me see, Wisconsin. Where's Scott Walker? So originally, Scott Walker was elected in 2010 in a red wave year for Wisconsin. He flipped the governor seat to the Republicans. There was a recall election with the same candidate running against, but they ended up losing. It was on an off-year election in 2012 before the presidential election. A few months before the race where Obama went head to head against Romney. And Scott Walker kind of dominated this race despite Obama carrying the state of Wisconsin in 2012. Then 2014 rolled around. Republicans had another red wave year. Scott Walker won. But ever since then, the Democrats have been pretty handedly winning these races, or not handedly. This was really close, but Scott Walker lost in 2018, was beat by Tony Evers, and then Tony Evers won by an even bigger margin in 2022. 2026 will be pretty interesting to see, but it's kind of just indicative of this more statewide flip towards Republicans or flip towards Democrats in Wisconsin outside of presidential election years. Yeah, the Florida Libertarians didn't really try in this election. They didn't have money to compete with the Democratic and Republican candidates, and they just had kind of a pathetic showing. But that's exactly how you'd expect them to be in these like off-year elections. The Republicans and the Democrats are going to spend a lot more money, and they're not going to face too much pressure from the Libertarians by any means. So now we can really kind of see results as 50% are in. This is a whopping 15% domination by the Democratic candidate. I expect that lead to crater pretty significantly, maybe about 5%. Rural Republican counties come in that have not been counted yet. All these ones up here. But either way, if this is the final result, if it's a 15% domination round, I would have to say that this is going to be a bad day for Mr. Musk, who spent a pretty small fortune in this state to try and flip it to the Republican justice. And it would be a pretty bad day for the Republican strategists in general, because they don't really have a strategy for winning these off-year elections. And you're always vulnerable. Like the House is within a 5-seat majority, and they could be really close if they lose some of those seats. if, God forbid, any of their politicians, have health issues or anything like that, they could be very close to a, losing the House before the midterms even happen. So I would say that the people that gave money to the Florida Dem campaigns weren't expecting to win. Um, I don't see how anyone could give money to a candidate in a district that just went to Trump by 30 and expect the Democrat to win. Um, they were just trying to kind of use these elections as barometer races. I think maybe they were trying to test the water to see if there was this like massive like backlash to Trump after he was elected. I didn't expect that type of thing to happen. They're kind of just trying to use that money to kind of use it as a testing ground. They don't need to spend nearly as much money as they would for like a national race later on down the line. So I would say, I don't think they wasted their money per se. They ran sacrificial lamb candidates to just show the percent change, because when you go from a Trump plus 30 district to a plus 14 district, that is having the amount of lead in that district. And it kind of shows, if this were to be extrapolated to every other seat in the country, if this exact election happened, Democrats would win like 100 House seats and have like a 15% shift. It could maybe even more than, something crazy like that. So, are they wasting their money? I mean, it's kind of your perception of wasting money. I think Musk spent money, and like a lot of the other Republican donors that did fund money in this race spent a lot of money with the goal of winning this election, because Trump just won it in 2024. One of the things Republicans have really been trying to find a way to mobilize is like these off-year elections where their base just doesn't turn out. They turn out when Trump's name is on the ballot, but in 2022 they didn't turn out as heavily, despite them doing pretty well against an incumbent president. In 2020 they didn't perform as well. Um, you know, or no, not 2020. In the 2020 off-year elections, before Biden was elected, in 2021 they performed particularly, better. And then right after that, those elections, Roe v. Wade got overturned, and they just have not been able to recover in these off-year elections since. Even all the way leading up to 2024, a lot of people were misled into believing these special elections were indicators of how 2024 would go. And the Republicans just kind of got beaten out in those elections up until 2024, where Trump had a pretty big victory that was unprecedented based on these special election results. But a key problem is Republicans are going to have to try and find people that aren't Trump that can turn out this base, because they very clearly can't in these special elections where they're getting beat 15% out of the water. Yeah, I believe that the gerrymandering was overturned in Wisconsin, or at least I'm not. I think they have just much more fair partisan maps that are more indicative of where the country is. Ultimately, like I'm pretty against gerrymandering when both sides do it, just based on it. Just is kind of a gross thing to do, to just design districts in a way so that democracy doesn't fundamentally work. And in Wisconsin's case, it has been historically gerrymandered by Republicans pretty heavily. So it has been good to see that more fair like less partisan maps have been proposed and adhered to. But their neighbor Illinois is like the flip example, where they have very partisan Democratic maps. And you have Democrats, they make the argument in these states that, well, if Republicans do it in other states, we're going to do it here until they stop doing it in these other states. And it kind of just, in both ends of it, it's condemnable. But you do see why they kind of have these perspectives, both Republicans and Democrats, and why they continue to do it. They're going to continue to do it as long as they can continue to get away with it. So what I would like to see is more federal enforcement against gerrymandering, either through the Supreme Court or through, legislation. I find it pretty hard to believe that legislation would occur. But it is pretty concerning that states can be gerrymandered that heavily, like Illinois or Wisconsin. But I'm not entirely convinced we're going to see the end of it anytime soon. In Wisconsin, I don't see Democrats running the table with their gerrymandering it the other way, but I could be wrong. It'll be interesting to see what they do with the continued liberal majority. They'll probably just maintain the maps that they established. But as you can see in 2024, it wasn't a Dem gerrymander because it went the way that it's kind of supposed to. 2024 Wisconsin State House results. So you can see here, the Democrats won 45 seats instead of 35, and they got nearly like 49% of the vote. So it just seems like it fairer maps, that are more closer aligned to where the party is. In fact, that still is some of a Republican gerrymander, depending on where some of those vote sinks are for Democrats, because they aren't getting 48% of the seats. But it's still much better. And it's good to see that the Democrats, when they did get power on the court, they didn't immediately gerrymander it the other way. But that's probably also because the Republicans still had the House, so they had to do their own map as well. So now we can see as more of the results come in, 50% is in, and it's a 15% victory for the Democrats still. Maybe it's getting closer to now 14%. But either way, that is very handed election victory. I expect it to crater down to like 7 to 10%. I kind of am curious. I do kind of want to see what Elon Musk is tweeting about right now to see his reaction. I do apologize to everyone that I am streaming Elon Musk tweets here. But actually, this is very important. This is a post from Twitter. But as you can see, the this map is pretty bad, or this graph is pretty bad. But you can kind of see that the Democratic money was spread through a lot of different fundraising people, George Soros being the highest in this case, Governor Pritzker, another big spender in this, Governor of Illinois. And then there were a few others that contributed, but the money was spread throughout a larger amount of, big money donors. The Republicans were very heavily, concentrated through Musk, and then Diane Hendricks and Elizabeth Uihlein and Richard Uihlein seemed to contribute pretty heavily as well. So there's more concentration on the Republican side of where that money was sourced. Let's see. So instead of talking about the Supreme Court election, he's deferring to the other thing that he wanted to pass, which is voter ID, which is something that is, for regardless of its merits, is something that is much more popular than Republican candidates. Voter ID is pretty popular in every state across the country, particularly conservative states. So that is something that I would expect. But yeah, he's just running the circles campaigning for this guy. And it just shows that his campaign strategy isn't working. I mean, like I said, this is cratering back down to like a 10% lead for the Democrat. But they spent money in this race with the intention of winning. That's why the Republicans made it more competitive. That's why they nationalized it. They wanted to flip the majority back to Republicans, and their strategy appears to have completely fell flat on its face. Sending Musk in, campaigning on, the mandate of Trump, they're just going to fall flat on their face each time. They are not able to galvanize their base in the same way that they were able to galvanize their base for Trump in 2024. And they're going to continue having this special election deficit where they can't energize people to turn out in off-year elections. 2023, where half the money was spent, the Democrats got 1 million people to turn out, and Republicans got 800,000 people to turn out, which is a pretty bad 55 to 44. In this race, it'll be pretty similar. I think it's going to be a similar 55 to 44. And it'll probably be like 1 million to 800,000 again. $100 million spent to get the exact same style results as 2023. I can try and see high vote sync counties. So let's do Waukesha County. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it, but Waukesha County. Waukesha, I think that's how you pronounce it. Yeah, that's a 6% flip from 2024. So it might not be as big as the Democrats would like. I'd say maybe like an 8% to 10% lead. Yeah, it's going to crater more. I think it is going to crater more. So yeah, maybe 7 to 8%. But really, unless the Republicans get it within 5, this is a bad result for them because they have a very nationalized race. They did nationalize it with the intention of getting the same result as 2024. They wanted people to vote in this election the same way they voted in 2024. They wanted to bring out all of those people that did vote in 2024, and they just couldn't do it. And it shows that local issues do kind of reign supreme in these types of elections. Let's see, Eau Claire County. Yeah, that's a pretty significant shift there. Portage County. Another huge shift there, 8%. Green Bay County. Yeah, no, that's not really in yet. Door County. Final results in from Door. Yeah, that looks like a 8 to 9% shift right there. There's still a lot of votes to come in from Milwaukee County, and if more votes come in from Milwaukee, that is going to be bad for the Republicans as well. We can analyze the voter ID requirement. One thing, so with voter IDs, part of the reason, essentially, it is a pretty particularly popular policy that people kind of would prefer people who come in to vote to have their ID. There is kind of opposition to it because sometimes in some states they kind of design them with the general intention just being having an ID allows you to verify a voter. The reason why there is some opposition to this policy being implemented is because in America, we don't have a national ID system really that's very effective. We have very split ID systems, and people end up having dozens of different IDs. And some states just make it so very specific IDs are the only things you can use in order to vote. So driver's license being one of them and state IDs. While most people do have driver's license or state IDs, people who are concentrated in cities are less likely to have them, or like obviously like someone who needs to be drove around everywhere they go, be that like a disabled person or whoever you use in that case. So the reason why some like there is some opposition to the idea of having voter ID laws, something that does seem to make most common sense is just the pure fact of different. There not being a very clear and concise voter ID policy in this country. So a lot of people who do have IDs, they tend to be higher propensity voters, and it does disenfranchise a lot of people, telling them, "Oh, like you have to have an ID to vote." However, it does depend on the election, of course. Now, in the case of like the idea that voter fraud exists because of a lack of voter ID laws, I would say that there's very little evidence to point that direction. But I personally am not like 100% against voter IDs. I just think what we consider an ID needs to be expanded. Like I'm not against someone having like a non-photo ID. Like, I mean, if someone has like a Medicaid card with them, I think maybe if they have some other type of evidence, they should be able to be allowed to vote, because not everyone has a driver's license or like a state issued ID on them at all times. But it does look like that is going to pass in Wisconsin. As we look in, there are a lot of votes to be counted in these like Republican VoteSync rural counties, but the key thing here is a lot of these counties do not have the population needed to really swing this election nearly as much toward the Republican as it would need to be. Trying to see counties that have 100% in right now. Walworth County has 82% in. That is another like relatively more populated Republican area. 56 to 44. It was 61 to 38. That is a pretty big shift towards the Democrat that the Republicans are not going to want to see. Racine County flipping to a Democrat, that didn't even happen in 2023 when they won by 10%. That is crazy. That might be the first time in decades that Racine counties went to a Democrat ever. Maybe outside of like some very rare election. I'd have to check with my friend on that. I'm going to double check. I'm going to message my friend about that. That is a huge flip. This is an indicator all throughout, an indicator all throughout different. It's a very big indicator all throughout national elections in America. One thing that we have seen is an urban-rural divide, but suburbification of like Democratic or suburbification is the wrong term to use, but in suburbs, Democrats have kind of gained their vote shares gradually over time as they've kind of tapped into voters that live in suburbs. Racine County is a perfect example of that. It's kind of suburbs that are sandwiched between Milwaukee and Kenosha County. And I'll have to check the 2008 Wisconsin results to see if Obama even won this area. So let me see. Obama did win this county. So it has been done before, but let me see if they have county results. Yeah, Racine County. Not bookmark. I don't have bookmark. Control F. Racine. So as you can see here, yeah, Democrats did win is by 8% in probably the biggest overperformance election they've had in decades in Wisconsin in 2008. In 2012, I can guarantee you they did not win that county. Oh, no, never mind. I was wrong. Racine County, I bet they barely won it with Obama here. Yeah, 51 to 44. Oh, so it still was a 4% victory margin. But as you can see, since 2012, Democrats have been improving in a lot of these rural areas or not rural, in suburban areas. And this is one of the key examples of that, 52 to 46. As you can see here, now 50 to 49, 8-point shift from 2024, just 6 months ago. And we're gradually seeing the trend of the WOW counties, these very conservative voting blocks that heavily voted for Romney, heavily voted for McCain, the most conservative area of Wisconsin at that time, now turning into these like light red districts. Azauki County being the one that's the most surprising, because if this flips, it would be like the first time Azauki County is like voted Democrat in any election, pretty sure like ever, at least in the last several decades. And that's a razor thin margin by 1% as of right now. I think the biggest takeaway though right now is this election is, despite $100 million being spent on it, double the amount that was spent in 2023. And I don't even want to know how much was spent in this one, but probably not that much compared to those two. This is the 2020 election. Right before the 2020 election, the Democrat won 55% of the vote. This 2023 election, the Democrat won 55% of the vote. And as of right now, I do expect this to crater a little bit. The Democrat is up 8 to 10% of the vote. So the one trend this is really showing me right now is that Democrats love to, at least in the past 5 to 10 years, have really loved to vote, or Democrats really have loved turning out in these elections, and that Wisconsin as a whole is much more likely to vote in liberal justices to the court than conservative justices. And it really isn't even tied to that much of a trend on how they vote in the national election. And Republicans did waste a lot of money on this election, I would say, in trying to make it competitive. They might have actually had a reverse effect, injecting Musk into the race at a time when he's not that popular. If they had sent Trump there a little bit more and kind of downplayed Musk's role and maybe crowdsourced the funding outside of, like, to different people that weren't exclusively Musk, they could have done a little bit better, I do think. But there's a fine line where they might have actually just caused a backlash to actually energize more Democrats out to vote. Then another thing Dennis was saying, fairer, better maps now. I think they're just going to keep the existing maps, which were fairer than the previous maps. And Republicans don't really like that. They're afraid that they're going to lose some of the House seats in Wisconsin. Oh yeah, I think it was just that the state house was changed to new maps, but they didn't change the congressional maps. And one of the things that Republicans were campaigning on was that Democrats were going to gerrymander these maps to benefit Democrats instead of Republicans, which is something that Republicans have done in the state of Wisconsin for decades. But Wisconsin, 2024, Wisconsin Senate. Or no, not Wisconsin Senate. Congressional elections. This is a state that votes 50-50, and Republicans have 6 seats and Democrats have 2. And I get that, like, local districts can sometimes swing a certain way, in a way that isn't like fair. But in a proportional system, it would be 4-4 based on these results. Democrats would have 2 more seats and Republicans would have 4 seats. So that would that alone would heavily change the makeup of the House, as the Republicans have a razor thin majority. So you can already kind of see that the gerrymander that the Republicans have put within the state of Wisconsin has massive national implications on the entire country. And we're getting more votes to come in. 66% in, as I've already made the call. Oh, it looks like the AP and New York Times already made the call as well. Susan Crawford won. Another thing is, I would heavily expect Yes to win this election. I think without a doubt, Yes is going to win this election. And then it'll be closer, but I also think the Democrats won the superintendent of public instruction. I would expect this to be a little bit more similar to how the Democrats are performing within the state of Wisconsin. There might be a little bit of that, like, post-election shift where some people get buyer's remorse and some people who are more apolitical Democrats are more, repoliticizing themselves and turning out in these off-year elections when they may not have cared as much in the past. So this election kind of just shows that Wisconsin is swinging back more towards Democrats after delivering Trump the victory in 2024. Dems reduced Trump's margin in Florida 1 and Florida 6 by 16. And we can kind of see what Elon is saying. Yeah, he isn't saying anything. It will be interesting. I don't think they're going to come out rigged or anything. So anyone that's tuning in for now, I'm probably going to start winding it down. It's already been called. I expect the final margin to be around 10%, probably 8 to 10% for the Democrat. It's probably going to crater a little bit. Either way, that's a pretty big shift from what it just was in 2024. Yeah, I think Musk did personally spend 20 mil on this election. We can kind of look at the fundraising in the Wikipedia here. Let's see. 100 million in total. Yep. Musk and groups tied to him have spent more than $25 million on ads just to get the exact same result as the 2023 result, in which the liberal justice handily defeated the conservative justice. So it does kind of show that as much money as you do funnel into politics, number one, Republicans and Democrats are matching each other pretty close. So whenever Republican big money donor or a Democratic big money donor throws a lot of money in an election, the other party has a war chest to respond. And they wanted this race. Both the Republicans wanted to win this race, and the Democrats kind of wanted to see, if they could continue winning these Wisconsin Senate elections like they have, or not Senate, Supreme Court elections like they have in the past few years. The last time a Republican has won, I believe, was this election. Let me just double check if Neubauer and Hagedorn. Hagedorn is affiliated with the Republicans. The last time they've had a competitive one was in 2019. Trump was still the president at that time, and the Republican won 50 to 20 or 50% to 49%. So in 2019, you did have it, and I think it flipped. It flipped the court towards conservatives. Oh, no. I think, no, it solidified it towards conservatives. I think it shifted it to a 2-5 majority, or 5-2 majority. And then 2020 happened. The Liberal candidate won. And in 2023, the Liberal candidate won against the same candidate. And now you have an even, or I would say probably the same margin, really. It's 10-11% victory. Are there any other good barometer counties? Okay, so Eau Claire County is now all in. It's like an 8% plus shift to the Democrat and an 8% negative shift for the Republican. That's pretty bad for them. Pretty bad for Schmiel there. Kenosha County, Racine County, and Azauki County. It looks like Azauki County isn't going to officially flip to the Democrats, but that is a crazy result to be seeing. And that once was one of the most conservative areas of Wisconsin. Now is a 50-50 swing area. Waukesha County as well, in Washington County. About a 6% shift there. This is where, Trump really, or the Republican-aligned candidates really needed to run the table in these, largely more conservative-leaning areas where they can have bigger vote sinks, like 100,000 votes here. There's more Republican votes in this suburban county than there are in the entire county of Milwaukee, despite the population difference. And they just didn't run their margins. I mean 60,000 more people voted for Republicans in 2024 than they did right now. They'll probably crater down to 50,000 as more votes come in, but those are all votes that they could have won, and they just couldn't mobilize despite spending, like I said, $100, or in their case, $50 million. And they had these very specific events where Elon Musk gave $1 million to these random people. Like I think he gave like $2 to $3 million to like single individual voters, where you had to be like proof that you already voted in the election to attend. That electoral strategy is just mind-boggling to me. I just don't see how giving a voter money, a single individual voter, giving a single individual voter money is going to swing the race. I don't understand why they did it. Maybe it was to try and like do a raffle to get all these people to like vote in the election. See how that was going to swing this race over to the Republicans. I really can't see how that would be effective. I mean, if you're going to do vote buying, you just like give everyone like $1,000 that shows up at the rally. Don't give $1 million into one person, people are going to be equally as mad at you doing that. And then, people will just be upset they didn't win the $1 million. They could have just gave $1,000 to like everyone that went to the rally. I just don't get it. I really don't get it. If anyone in the comments can get a more effective vote buying strategy, please feel free to comment it. But yeah, I really don't understand why anyone would give $1 million to just random, people. As you see, more votes are trickling in here. Astounding result. Oh yeah, Cory Booker did like a 25-hour speech for like a nomination. It actually did break a record. He might have just been kind of doing it. Cory Booker, this is where I definitely prefer to give election coverage and not political coverage. But in my personal opinion, Cory Booker is a little grandstanding politician, and he loves to kind of like do like the very specific thing of like doing the longest filibuster ever just so he can say that he did the longest filibuster ever. He did do that, and he broke, just for the sake of him doing this, actually, let's see, longest filibuster. Historically, it was Strom Thurmond's filibuster of the Civil Rights Act, which is kind of like a pretty dark part of American history, that the longest filibuster was a guy standing against the Civil Rights Act. And it is kind of good. I would say that Cory Booker, like kind of the grand broke that record. He's protesting the second Trump administration. That was kind of the purpose of it. He gave like a 25-hour speech. He broke every other filibuster in the history of filibusters. Most recent one that lasted that long being Ted Cruz speaking on the Continuing Appropriations Act. Let me see. What was it even really about? I think he was like filibustering the nomination for some Trump officials. Cory Booker's speech on what? It was a really weird thing for him to pick. I know that I want to more discuss election results and not give my political analysis, because I personally don't like giving political analysis as much as I like covering elections. But it's a really weird thing for him to pick. I mean, I don't see why they didn't do this filibuster on like the budget cloture vote, where they actually could have like had like some type of political purpose. But he gave this speech, marathon speech. I have ad blockers, so I'm probably getting killed by all of these articles. Yeah, so let's see. I'm trying to see what caused him to do this. I mean, in my opinion, it is kind of crazy that someone can speak for 25 hours straight. I never even want to attempt that. But he passed Mr. Thurmond. Yeah, he's just talking about how he did it to break the record, and this kind of just goes into the fact that Cory Booker is a little bit of a grandstander, and he doesn't really have as much of like the policy end of it, but he does have the political end of it. As much as I'm getting to the point of what the point of this speech was, and I think that's pretty indicative of the failure of his speech, where like he just did it to like filibuster talking about some random appointee who probably just wanted to like get assigned to his role. But I'm sure he said some good things in it. I respect the fact that he did it. pretty interesting. He did do it, and I think it also just it gives a sense that Democrats are kind of doing more to resist the Trump administration. I think that's kind of the goal of this speech, where like it gets covered in that way. It's crazy. He spent over 24 hours speaking, though. I just can't believe that he did that. It is good, though, that he beat out Strom Thurmond being anti-civil rights. Good for him, I guess. Let's see. More results coming in. I don't really expect it to change much from where it already is. I mean, that's a 10% victory for the Democrat. It might crater down to 8% worst case scenario for it. But yeah, does anyone else have any comments they want to ask me about on what to give my hot take on? Because yeah, ultimately with Cory Booker giving that speech, it's more like he just did it to kind of. It was kind of like unrelated to politics, but it was like when Eminem did the song specifically to break the amount of words in a song. That's kind of what Cory Booker did with the filibuster speech. But as more people are tuning in, the results as it shows right now show an 11-point victory. Or yeah, I think no, it's only 10% now. It's only 10% victory for the Democrat right now in the Wisconsin Supreme Court election result. And as you can see in a lot of these key counties, the flips from 2024 in Dane County, that is a 7 or 8% flip from the previous results. In some of these other counties, like let's do Bayfield, a North Wisconsin, more rural area, 63-37. As you can see, as it compares, it's 55-43. So that's a pretty big 10% flip. Or was it 12%? Yeah, no, that's actually pretty big, pretty substantial flip there. More votes coming in Green Bay. Okay. This other election, like I was saying earlier, is kind of just a more partisan race. I feel like the Supreme Court election, it was nationalized, but I think that there was a bias that the Democrat was going to perform better in this race for a variety of reasons. Like the Democrats already maintained it. It was kind of a replacing a Democratic seat or a liberal-leaning seat. Of course, it is a nonpartisan election. It just has been made a very partisan election by the national media and all the money that was spent on it. It went from being this nonpartisan election that I did expect the Democrat to win in, to the Democrat really overperforming, it seems, based on the money that was spent and the politicization of it. Politicization of it. And then in this race, it's more of a generic Democrat versus generic Republican. Maybe there's a little bit of a bias because I do think, like, for some reason, more Americans are, like a little bit more socially conservative on how schools should be run than, I guess, their Supreme Court. Maybe specifically in Wisconsin, that's the case, but it still looks like a pretty handy win for the Democrat by, 5 to 6%. So I would say, with everything we know now, I would say this result is going to be more indicative of how 2024 would have went if the election were being held today. So I do think Wisconsin has shifted a little bit to the Democratic side in just the 6 months since, or 5 months since November. Does this give you like optimism? I would say, like, from a Democratic partisan perspective, I think this does definitely give Democrats hope in the sense that they have momentum. Um, it is very good in Wisconsin, I would say, because if if the Republican justice did win, you would see them be able to kind of implement, re-gerrymander some of the maps that I would say. I mean, in my personal opinion, I know I have political biases, but I would say, re-gerrymandering that state house election would kind of just be grotesque, like, in my opinion, because I tend to just very heavily dislike gerrymandering. I think it's an anti-democratic thing when both parties do it, and I think it should be completely taken out of the hands of state legislative officials. And the map that the Democratic Supreme Court put forward was a lot more fair. And I think those maps should be also put forward for the Wisconsin, House seats and or like the federal House seats, and for other races in Wisconsin. And I would like to see less partisan maps all throughout the country, particularly in states that have been such heavily gerrymandered, like Wisconsin, to the point where like you could even question the idea of calling it like a fair and open democracy. Oh, I could show you maps in Illinois. Illinois is pretty hysterically gerrymandered as well. This is just their House of. I would say both Wisconsin and Illinois. You could question their actual like democratic status just based on how gerrymandered some of these results are. They're just two good examples of it. I mean, I mean, you. I would say if you just look at this map alone, it it just doesn't seem right. You can make an argument that like the cities within this belt have more in common with each other than they do with their like more rural metro areas. And I could kind of agree with that. So maybe this constituency that is being represented by this map is a little bit more representative. But the way these maps are drawn are deliberately to pull as many Republicans as possible into these big red areas and to maximize as many Democrats as possible into these blue areas. And it's a pretty disgusting example of gerrymandering in a state that, like, it is like 60-40 Democrats. So, like, this is where most of the population is. And some of this is also a result of the direct effort to make, racialized districts based on the Voting Rights Act. So there is like an element of it where you have to make it a little bit like this. But I mean, come on, like, what the hell is this right here? Like, do you see how like jagged that is? I mean, is there even a road that connects this map for this specific district? On a whim, that just looks wrong to me. It looks pretty disgusting to me. I really can't believe there is something like that. Now you do have a state like Maryland where it looks like these districts are gerrymandered. But the problem with Maryland is it's such a democratic state when it comes to federal, or Massachusetts was the state I was kind of thinking of. I feel like Maryland, they might be able to like find. No, I think that this is the one seat that they can find that would be red enough to be a Republican seat. The Democrats could gerrymander this a lot easier in a way that benefits them. But as you can kind of see, like, it's just such a partisan state that most of the seats go towards the Democrat. That isn't the case in a state like Illinois. And also, I mean, California, for what it's worth, hasn't done like a full gerrymander. A lot of the races are made to be more competitive and jumpy, and it's just more of results of California being a pretty partisan state that has caused it to be more democratic. And Republicans only have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 seats out of like 48 or something like that. I don't know the exact amount in California, but either way, like it's still kind of drawn pretty fairly. The districts are made for the most part in a way that like represent individual constituencies and districts. I mean, in LA it gets a little weird, but that's because LA is like one of the worst organized metropolitan areas in the country. So gerrymandering in California, while it does exist, there was a independent commission that was put together by the former Republican governor Arnold Schwarzenegger that did kind of do an effort to make these more competitive elections and not like strictly partisan elections that went one way. And that's why you can kind of see different districts flipping over time as different things happen in California, at least. Wisconsin's much more of an example of like a hard partisan gerrymander, and I'll show Wisconsin House seats. So this is a state that regularly is 50-50 in how people vote. But like, come on, look at this map. It's very clearly made. These 2 seats right here could be more competitive, but it's very clearly made for them to like throw in Republican vote sinks. And this is like a super Democratic area. It's deliberately made in a way that makes it so Democrats aren't split into other districts, which limits their ability to win these races. So it is kind of a big problem with gerrymandering. That can be a bipartisan issue, as I showed Illinois map earlier. But you have kind of a race to the bottom with gerrymandering where like, if you are a partisan Illinois Democrat and you see like, oh, they're gerrymandering every other state, why not do it here? And that's what justifies it, and that's what causes it. You need some type of federal arbitrator, in my opinion, that tells states they have to have independent maps and have to create criteria for it. They have to hire social science scientists. I think there's plenty of universities that study gerrymandering, and there'd be plenty of professors that would be able to work on creating at least models or strategies for fairer maps. And instead, they're handled very specifically by very partisan, either think tanks or state legislative bodies that, in some ways, you could say maybe not rig, but tip the scale of elections in one way or the other. So let's see here. 76% of the vote in. I did already declare Crawford hours ago would be the winner here, but we're still seeing a lot of votes come in, and it's looking like it's going more towards like 8 to 9% victory in the end, which is still particularly bad for the Republicans if you spend $50 million to try and flip the seat and you get blown out of the water. This, I think, is going to crater more to like 4 to 5%, like I was saying earlier. I can compare, like, let's see Bayfield County 62 to 38. Yeah, it's still significantly different from these results. 66. Oh, wow, Milwaukee. 66-34. I don't remember Milwaukee being that close. Maybe the Brittany Kinzer is from Milwaukee. I'm not entirely certain why that would be that close. That could this might be a little bit more of a race. Dane County looks more in line. Brown County. I think Brown County has more votes to come in, though. Let's see Door County, 55 to 45. Yeah, I still think her, but she's still gonna win. So with that, unless anyone else has any other comments, um, I could go a little bit more like how do you handle living or keeping up with this administration? I mean, I would say this election result is a pretty key tell to say that it's definitely um, America is still a very politically divided country, and it's one that's still very heavily subjected to trends and large shifts in either direction. And despite what happened in November, this is a key example of a swing state flipping back towards a Democrat in a pretty key election. So I would say this is definitely something that Democrats should be happy about. I would say even more encouraging to Democrats would be these like massive 16-point shifts in these U.S. House districts in Florida in two different elections where Trump picked some of the most you know conservative seats. Like in order to pick people in his cabinet for national roles, he picked out of some of the most conservative seats in the country. Um, and this being within 15 points when it was previously a Trump plus 30 district is very concerning for the Republicans, because if that is extrapolated, a 15-point shift towards Democrats all throughout the country in 2026, that would be really bad for the Republicans. And I mean, Democrats are winning counties in the Panhandle in Florida. I mean, this is one of the most like conservative areas of the country, and out here, like they're winning a Panhandle county. Another thing that's pretty key here. I mean, Matt Gaetz is a disgraced representative based on what he was doing, but it does show that there's kind of just a general shift away from Republicans and shift towards Democrats, and it shows at these federal level House elections massive shifts that we were seeing at these very small state level elections in like Pennsylvania, where there were like shifts in special elections towards the Democratic candidate. And we'll continue to see that going forward. If we do continue to see that, it's kind of more indicative that the Democrats have a lot of momentum going forward. And in my personal opinion, this is me giving me more. This is giving much more of my opinion perspective rather than my an analysis perspective. When I do analysis of election results, I try to be very politically unbiased, and I just try to give the results as I see them and as they come in. That's why I make early. I try to have a lot of legitimacy with my early calls because I don't like it to be like a partisan thing. But if I do want to give like a personal opinion here, I would say that with this trend towards Democrats, we've still yet to see a lot of the effects of like how tariffs could affect the average voter's opinion, or how different the national political environment could affect the national voter's opinion. And I would say as more turmoil hits the economy, these special elections could be getting even worse for Republicans, and then it would lead into the midterm. I would say it's too close to call how the midterm is going to go. But if the midterm were to happen today, based on how people are viewing elections and how people are voting in these special elections today, I would say the Democrats would pretty handily win a lot of the House races, ultimately winning the House and making it pretty hard for Republicans to continue their legislative agenda. So if I were the Republicans looking at these results, I would want to push through my legislative agenda as quickly as possible, because after only another 18 months until the November 2026 midterms happen, and that's only a year and a half. And when that does occur, they'll no longer have the House. if these current trends occur. So I think they should try to pursue their agenda if that is something they want to do. And I would also say, they're doing a lot of their agenda through these executive actions that are, prone to the court throwing out and seem to be like less politically popular. All of this leveraging with tariffs, all of these like, being a federal worker myself, obviously, not really too big a fan of that. But, a lot of this targeting the federal workforce through this executive action, I feel like the American people would respect legislative action a lot more than executive action, where you kind of use the like political support that you won in the election, and then take that to the voters themselves. So you use this political support and vote on legislation and pass it, and then have a clear like mandate to what you're doing. That would be something that would be make a lot more sense right now. And I think if Republicans continue to just try to pass their agenda exclusively through the executive branch, they're going to miss out a lot of time that they have where they have full power. I mean, they have the Senate, they have the House, and the presidency. They could be passing anything through right now, but they're relegating most of their agenda to the executive orders, which they're going to have for 4 years, regardless of what occurs. So I think they're kind of missing their opportunity to pass legislation at this time. Not that I'm griping about that at all. I would never complain about Trump going golfing, in my personal opinion, because that's another weekend that he's not implementing his agenda. But let's see. It's 80% of the vote in. It really hasn't shifted too radically from before. I mean, now it's down to a 10% lead for the Democrat, and I expect that to stay within an 8 to 11% range as the final votes come in. Dane County is fully in, and we can kind of compare the top line results to 2023. So this was expected because double the amount of money. Like let's state it clearly: $100 million was spent on this election. 2 years ago, in April of 2023, almost to the exact date 2 years ago, just off by 3 days, $50 million was spent. Still a ridiculous amount. Democrats got 1 million voters to come out. Republicans got 820,000 voters to come out. Now, with 80% of the votes in, it does look like more people did come out. It was a little bit more of a nationalized race, but everyone they turned out, it seems to have like a reverse effect. When Republicans injected more money into this race, Democrats were able to match it practically dollar for dollar, and organize their own base into coming out to the exact same margin. So it's kind of indicative of a shift back to the Democrats, and almost an hilariously identical election to 2023 and 2020 for that matter, which was 5 years ago, to like almost on the dot. Also crazy that the map there's almost no shifts in the map. Not all the counties are in right now, so it isn't really fair to directly compare, but the map looks very similar. So it almost is like there hasn't been that much of a shift in the past few years, other than in the area around Wisconsin. I assume that some of these rural counties are getting more Republican over time, but this area right around Milwaukee, the WOW counties, which have historically been the most conservative part of the state, are gradually becoming bluer. Racine County isn't a WOW county, but it's one of these suburban areas around Milwaukee, flipping back to the Democrats in a way that they didn't even do it in 2023 is pretty insane to think about. But like Republicans are still doing better in these like rural counties. I mean, Grant County was something that the Democrats won in 2023 and 2020, but they're not winning it now. So the rural Republican voters are still staying rural, and then the more urban Democratic voters are still staying or shifting more Democratic still. With that, I don't really think there's much more to talk about at this time. I think I made all my perspectives on the election pretty clear. I'll try to see. Oh, my predict on turnout. In comparison to 2024, you can see 3.4 million votes. And in comparison to 2023, how many were the total votes? Only 1.8 million votes. I would say at my guess is it's going to be about 2 million, and maybe 2.2 million at most. Yeah, at the very highest, 2.2. But I would say it's going to be between 2 million and 2.1 million. So with that, that's more people voting than 2023. But with how much money was spent in this race, I would consider it pretty crazy that many people kind of stayed home, I would say. And it really didn't affect, the money didn't really affect the election that much because both parties were spending. And it really just shows that Musk's war chest isn't going to carry the Republicans to victory. It's not going to deliver Trump's mandate. I honestly think Musk throwing money at these elections is really only going to incentivize Republicans to not want to irritate Trump to mount a primary challenger. So some of the more moderate Republicans in like moderate districts or like Democratic leaning districts might be voting hook, line, and sinker with Trump just out of fear that Musk might primary them. But when it comes to general elections, I would really be concerned if my election strategy in 2026 was just to depend on Musk's money in that race. Republicans are going to need to court a lot of different constituencies, a lot of different donors, a lot of different, people in their base that turned out for him in 2024. They have to either deliver for them or show them that they're going to go after the things they voted for them for and not things that they thought they wouldn't go after. So it's going to be a hard set of stairs to climb for Republicans going into 2026 when we know that historically the incumbent presidency party is much more likely to lose seats in the House and Senate. So as a prediction for turnout in 2026, I would say this is looking a little bit better for Democrats than for Republicans with these results that we're seeing. We can't forget these Florida results as well. 82% in now. I can't see the results switching that much off of what it already is. So with that, I think I might wrap everything up unless anyone has any last minute things they want me to like touch on. And no problem to Dennis. I really, this is the thing I like doing the most when it comes to like elections. I don't really like to be a political commentator that much. I do delve into it when I think it's necessary, but I do love covering elections, and I like seeing, implications out of what happens from elections. So that's why I do these. Anyone else have anything for the comments, or I might be wrapping it up all now. As I expected, the voter ID did go pretty significantly towards forcing voter ID laws. I just hope they implement it in a fair way. In some states, they do like, oh, you have to have this very specific type of ID. And like most people have different types of IDs. Some people have a state ID, some people have a driver's license, some people have military ID that they use. And if you don't allow these like more expansive types of IDs that, you know, certain people might be more like, I do understand the importance of verifying people are who they are when they go to vote. But when it comes down to like, you know, you have to have this very specific type of ID that not everyone might have, particularly like a driver's license. You know, like I think it gets a little bit into the disenfranchisement territory, which is why I mean I personally would have voted against this, but I understand the why someone would vote for it. I just don't know if I would trust them to implement it in a way that, you know, is fair. This election also is coming in, and it's much closer than the Supreme Court election, but doesn't look like it's going to be any different. Wisconsin is kind of an outlier in how Supreme Court seats are determined. A lot of states just have them be appointed by the governor, but this is a nice thing about American democracy. Every state has its own laws. You know, some states, some counties within different states choose to have, you know, elections for judges. And when you think about it, really, judges, they're supposed to be very nonpartisan. But when you do think about it, you know, an election like this, um, it isn't really that different from having a partisan governor appoint them. So I do really respect the fact that you know, different states have different things of doing, different ways of doing it, and I don't have anything against partisan elections of judges. And I think it's good that different states handle their politics and their different political perspectives like that properly, or differently, not properly. And then, yeah, this poll, Atlas Intel, which had the Democrat up 7%, 53 to 46, seems exactly on point with how the exact result was going to end up. I would say it's going to be even more leaning to the Democrat when all the votes are counted, which is very bad for people who spent $20 million to flip this race. I do kind of wonder what the Republican reaction to this will be. I highly doubt they're going to go with the this election was rigged thing. It's just not as important of an election to do. Obama's already saying that she won. I could have never imagined that I'd be taking on the richest man in the world for justice in Wisconsin, and we won. Just crying while she won a victory. That is, you know, good for her. You know, I like I said, I don't really like doing more political coverage, so I don't really want to share her direct speech. But that's definitely open to see. I do want to see if Elon Musk said anything, because he did spend $50 million. Yep, he said and voter ID. So he really wanted this voter ID thing to like, you know, just have an issue to run on. But it is hilarious. It's just like another proof of like, you know, if Democrats were rigging elections, they would have rigged both elections. It's just, you know, just because an election goes away, you don't want it to, doesn't mean the election was rigged. Which is why, you know, I really don't think, you know, 2024 was rigged any more than any other election, because like, you know, Democrats didn't do well, but that has nothing to do with like, you know, Republicans rigging it. It just has to do with they just didn't run as good of a campaign, and you know, Biden kind of shot Harris in the foot. by like choosing to drop out that late in the race. With that, though, pretty much results we need to see have already came in. I mean, we still have like a little bit out of some of these counties, but I think I'm going to end the coverage for now. We already know who won and have a pretty good idea of why. And I would like to definitely cover more of these elections in the future. I do kind of want to see if there's national or U.S. election calendar to see if there's any other elections I could cover in the future, just to analyze how that race, new races are going. Okay, so there are a bunch coming up. None of these, like, I'm not going to do a stream for San Jose's city council by any means, but there are some pretty important elections that are coming up. I would want to prefer to only do coverage in the future if it's just like a big election. But let's see here. I don't think there were any like big runoff elections that would carry. Yeah, none of these really looked that interesting to me. That to the point where I'd cover them. But we have a lot to look forward to. And this was a big election. So with that, I'm wrapping things up. Thank you all for tuning in throughout various times. I'm not entirely sure, but I usually average around 4 to 5 people listening in. So I was happy to provide that coverage. And it's interesting night to see the results as they came in. With that, I'm going to end the stream. So thank you all for tuning in. And I will be back in the future for future streams.